If I mapped out my past route, it would all be hard to follow. Heroin took my parents in and spit them out as a broken model. Broken bottles and no tomorrows, lonely sorrows and phony mottos like I'm doing good, I'm just fine, but inside my soul was hollow. My name is Dillon Chase. I thought I responded to Christ when I was 5 years old and my dad had me say the sinner's prayer. But the truth is, I was responding to a false idea I had about Christ. I didn't really know who he was. I find it really interesting that the same age my dad told me about the sinner's prayer is the same age I saw my dad overdose from heroin. Growing up outside of Dallas, Texas, both of my parents were addicted to drugs and alcohol. They were in and out of rehab, and I began to form this disconnect between this God who I was told was loving and gracious and a home life that was full of dysfunction, anger, drug addiction, alcoholism. I didn't see where God was in all of that. By the time I was in middle school, my dad went from going out into South Dallas to use drugs to bringing drugs into our home. And it was even harder to see my dad strung out. I remember he would go into me and my brother's bathroom and put a towel under the crack of the bathroom door and turn on the vent and would use. I'd go to bed and hear him in there. I'd wake up in the morning and he would still be in there, and I was afraid to knock on the door because I thought he had died from an overdose. Now, the darkest part of my story isn't the sin that was done to me, isn't the neglect. It isn't the fact that, I knew my parents loved me. I just felt like they loved drugs and alcohol more than me. It wasn't the abuse. It wasn't the loneliness and heartache. The darkest part of my story was not the sin done to me, but the sin done by me. Because in my heart, I hated God. I was bitter. I was angry towards my parents, which means I was a murderer at heart. I was arrogant. I used my words to tear people down when God gave me words to build people up. I was a fornicator. I was making myself to be my own God, and I was setting my own rules of morals. I thought just because I didn't drink or do drugs, I was okay. And by the time I was 16, I left my house for the third time. By the time I was 17, summer of my junior year, I didn't have anywhere to stay. Until the first week of my senior year of high school, a Christian family took me in. And this is when God answered my age-old question of where were you when this happened? Where were you when this tragedy happened? I mean, I really believe God owed me heaven just because my life was tough. But now I was forced to reckon with a family who I saw was totally transformed by the gospel. I saw a father who lovingly disciplined and was involved in his kids' life. I saw a husband who cared for and cherished and provided for his wife. And I knew the one person who made all the difference was Jesus. I still resisted. I graduated. I was a teenage dad. And God is just starting to convict me of my sin over a period of 6 months. The sin that used to bring me pleasure is now bringing me disappointment. And in September of 2004, God pierced my heart with this amazing truth that where he was when all of these things happened was that 2,000 years ago, he left the glories and the comforts of heaven to come to a world he created. He was born of a virgin. He was God wrapped up in a human body. He lived a life I could never live in my place. He died a death for my sins that I deserved in my place. He resurrected victoriously, defeating sin, death, and the grave in my place for the glory of God and for my eternal good. And now his arms were extended to receive anyone who would turn from their sin and trust in him. And he never promised me my parents wouldn't struggle with drug addiction. He never promised me my life wouldn't be hard. He just promised me I would be forgiven of my sins and that I could have a peace that surpasses understanding. And my life was forever changed. And a matter of fact, responding to the gospel and responding to the grace, mercy, and love of God every day. I now get to use my gifts with hip-hop music and travel the country with my son as my DJ. Married 12 years by the grace of God. Have 4 children that I'm able to provide a functional home centered around Christ that I never knew growing up. I've been able to see my mom encounter and respond to the gospel and be restored from her drug addiction and over 9 years sober. I've been blessed to see the power of God move in miraculous ways, but it always starts with a response. How will you respond to the love of Jesus?